Okay, I'm titling this chapter um, "Rock and Roll and Why I Love Zooey Deschanel." Um, I'm 50, I'm 52 years old. I was born in the year 1961. I was the last of 8 kids. I have 4 older sisters, and I grew up listening to records. I've got I mean, these things are pretty much trashed now, but I've got a whole bunch of records from those days. I grew up listening to the kind of music that, late 50s, early 60s. I mean, I'm sitting here holding a copy of Georgie Girl by the Seekers. I have, I recently came across a Doris Day record that I had. It wasn't Que Sera Sera. It was Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow, or something like that. And um, I did used to have some Elvis Presley 45s, but I gave them all away to a guy that I know who really loved Elvis Presley. I thought it was a nice present to him. I didn't think my vinyl was really worth anything. Um, but um, I hope I prepared myself for this a little better. But um, I um, I grew up in that era of rock and roll. Um, and um, so anyway, getting cutting to the chase. I um I became a vinyl fan really early in my life. I was more into music than I was um, more into music than I was into movies and television. I uh, I even learned how to play the guitar. Was in a rock band for 15 years. We really weren't that great, but I can't even really listen to stuff. I actually I wanted to be Eric Clapton, and people compared me more to Tony Iommi, which isn't bad because I mean I think Tony Iommi's a great guitar player. It's just I ended up being more heavy metal than I was rock and roll, which is fine. But I mean I look back on that now and I'm proud of it, you know. But but what I really liked was I'm gonna pull a few albums up here. Of course, you've seen. Probably, okay, I just dropped my keyboard. Oh, I hope I don't knock anything off while I'm doing this. Okay, we're still going. Good. I mean, you probably see me do this. Uh, Pull up this album because that I've made that my catchphrase. Younger than yesterday, but I've got a lot of cool vinyl. I've got 2,500 albums. It's not just rock and roll. It's jazz. It's classical. It's I mean, a lot of great stuff. But anyway, where was I going with the story? I um this album came out back in I think 2010. It's Zoe and Matt Ward's second album, and Spin Magazine did a review on it, and they said I wasn't picking it; I was scratching the outside. Spin Magazine did a review on it, and they gave it their equivalent of 2 out of 4. So they gave it 5 out of 10, but it was their equivalent of 2 out of 4 stars, which basically said they were calling it average. And then they said um, um, uh, uh, they took a dig at it and said fans of 70s AM radio will sip this down like a well-aged Chardonnay. And I'm like, you idiots, that's exactly why I listen to it. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, grew up with the 70s AM radio. This was my one of my first albums right here. Olivia Newton-John. I love her. I I actually the opportunity to see her in concert once, and she was fantastic. She was really great. I've got the book the picture book for it too, and I didn't think to pull that out, and I'm not going to go get it now. But I love 70s AM radio. I love rock and roll, classic rock and roll, because I grew up with the old stuff. And when I was in high school, or just as I was getting out of high school, this album came out. Dave Edmunds, Repeat When Necessary. Um, I thought it was one of the best albums I ever heard in my life. Um, this was the one that followed up. It was Rockpile. It was Dave Edmunds and Nick Lowe. Well, Nick Lowe was also on Repeat When Necessary, but they also did another one called Labor of Lust, but because they had a record contract dispute, they couldn't use the name Rockpile. But both Repeat When Necessary, um, which had the hit song Crawling from the Wreckage on it, and uh, Nick Lowe's, I don't have it now. The one that had Cool to Be Kind on it, that was a Rockpile album too. And then they finally were able to get past their contract disputes and do a Rockpile album. This also came with a 45 in it. Or no, it wasn't a 45. It was a 7-inch. It played at 33. You know, the slow speed, but it was a 7-inch. It had 4 songs on it where Dave Edmunds and Nick Lowe did 4 Everly Brothers songs. Rip Phil Everly. Um, it's in my 45 collection. But my 45 collection is so huge, and I don't feel like going to go look for it right now. But I could show it to you if I had it. Um, anyway, this album, Repeat When Necessary, came out when I was in high school. Okay, so I am, I, I knew who Zooey Deschanel was. Uh, I'd seen her in interviews. I'm a big fan of Craig Ferguson. She was on his show several times. Funny thing is, even I'd seen her in a lot of movies on cable, but the only one that I actually had in my collection was my was the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. In fact, hold on, I'll show you this. Hold on, I've got it underneath. I'm layered. It's so cold here. My favorite Doctor Who T-shirt. It's got David Tennant, Prima Angelman. It's got K9 on it and a Dalek. I'm actually wearing an Olivia Newton-John T-shirt just because I was in the mood, because I was going to do this podcast. Um, but um, I knew who Zooey was, and then, but I mean, I, it didn't, click with me until, this album came out, and a friend of mine posted a video of the song "In the Sun" on there, which, as if I'm not mistaken, is her only top 5 hit. Um, she It was so funny. I was in the grocery store 2 weeks ago, and I heard it. I mean, I've heard this before. I mean, I was in a restaurant one time. I heard it, but I was in the grocery store like 2 weeks ago, and it came on, and I was done shopping. I was almost ready to go to the cash register. I stopped just to listen to it, even though I have it at home. I stopped to listen to it, and then what really ticked me off was the fact that when they got to Matt's guitar solo, they just faded it out and went to the next crappy song. But it was anyway. I thought it was a great album. I love 70s AM radio. It it struck me. It was great. It was great stuff. And that's when I really, really, really started to like her. I like, because I like music more than I like film and television. Even though, anyway, we'll go into that later. But anyway, when I heard that this album was going to come out, this is her 4th album. Even though it's titled Volume 3, it's therefore actually it's not even that because they also worked on the Winnie the Pooh soundtrack, which I have. It's only on CD, but I have that too. Um, the but this was their actual official fourth album because they did a Christmas album and they didn't label it Volume. So this one was labeled Volume 3, and I thought, I knew that when the album was coming out, I was expecting it to be good, hoping that it would be as good as at least as good as Volume 2. But instead, it ended up being as good as this. And when this album came out, I was telling everyone that this is the best album. I kept telling everybody this is the best album to ever come out since Repeat When Necessary by Dave Edmunds, and I still hold to that. It it's that good. It's one of the most impressive and best albums I've ever heard in my life. Um, so that's I love rock and roll, and that's why Zooey. You know, yeah. One last thing I want to say before I bore everybody. 'Cause I'm probably boring you anyway. Um, but um, Zoe gets labeled a lot with a lot of different things that I know probably annoys her. Cute, quirky, and adorable, and all that kind of stuff. Um, I've got my own label for Zoe. She probably won't like that either because I don't think she likes being labeled with anything. But I do have my own label for her. I call her my little rock and roll girl. And so, anyway, I'm Benjamin Zechariah Garrett. This is Milwaukee's Best Ice, younger than yesterday.